David, thank you for that warm welcome. Welcome. I guess the reason that I'm here today is that I'm lucky enough to be a producer in Hollywood. However, probably many of you are wondering, what does a producer do? I'm wondering the same thing. Just kidding. The way I look at it is that every movie is a startup company, and that a producer is the CEO of that company. It's my responsibility to bring the dream of the movie to a reality. I oversee everything from the script development and casting to the production and marketing of a film. It's my responsibility to bring a product to the marketplace that at least meets and hopefully exceeds the public's expectation. The journey is never easy. But on every film, there are two moments that I always look forward to. The first is when the director calls action for the first time. It reminds me why I'm there. It reminds me that despite the months or even years of planning that's led up to that moment, that filmmaking is about walking the walk and not talking the talk. It's not enough to have good intention or big ideas. Making movies is about putting your money, your time, and talent where your mouth is. Every take, every shot begins with a call to action. In life, what that call is, that's up to you. What you decide to put out into the world, that's up to you. And I've been making movies for a long time now, and I can tell you that what keeps me coming back to doing it every day, it's not the salary or the hobnobbing with celebrities. It's the feeling that I get at the end of every day that I'm contributing to something bigger than myself, something that might bring laughter or joy or a small measure of enlightenment to the lives of other people. The knowledge that if my colleagues and I create something and we work hard with a true purpose, that we might do something that makes people feel glad to be alive, or that manages to nudge the world in some very small way, something that inspires people to take action themselves. People often ask me, what type of movies do I want to make? My answer is that I want to make movies that have a theme that is bigger than their genre. Because to me, the theme is what you leave the theater with, while the plot you leave at the theater. The theme is the emotional connection. It's the ultimate goal to have themes that cause a ripple effect. The ripple effect of change, something that helps move the culture towards a decency and empathy, a justice. But how do we do this? The answers aren't simple. But I'll tell you the one thing, you can't do it by boring people. You can't change the world by making people eat broccoli. I don't know everything there is to know about filmmaking, that's for sure. But I do know what excites me. I do know that it all comes down to telling a story. Everything we do as filmmakers is about telling a good story. What's the value, though, of a good story, you might ask? How can stories do what lectures and vegetables can't do? Well, it turns out that we humans actually need them as much as we need school books and vitamins, because stories teach us and nourish us as much in the same way. It turned out that watching a hero's journey can actually help you feel like a hero in your own life, that being on the edge of your seat can help you get back on your feet, that story resolution can inspire real-life conflict resolution. Stories do this through the magic of empathy. They allow us to walk in another man's shoes. Films work their magic by transporting us to other worlds, other times, and most importantly, other consciousnesses. I produced a movie called Avatar that was literally about transporting the consciousness of a human into the mind and a body of another on a different planet. And we actually made the film by doing much the same thing, by using cutting-edge technologies that allowed our director, Jim Cameron, to point his camera at an actor. An actor wearing no costume, no makeup, and seeing not the actor, but the CG character that he was playing. It was like pointing a camera at Robin Williams and seeing the genie in Aladdin. So Jim actually wrote Avatar 10 years before we ever started production on it because those themes were important to him. But we waited for the technology to catch up to us. And the technology and the film's subject matter made the experience of making Avatar feel like we were digging into the very essence of filmmaking. We spent every day on the set of Avatar, the actors, the directors, the designers, the producers, seeing through the eyes of others. You couldn't possibly do your job on that set unless you were seeing things from a different perspective and acknowledging the many sides and the many issues addressed by the film. Which brings me to my second favorite moment on a movie, screening the movie for an audience. Because while the audience is watching the movie, I'm watching the audience. And with Avatar, I witnessed an audience putting themselves in the midst of our characters, sharing the perspective of the colonizers and the native Na'vi people they colonized, allowing themselves to see things differently. Science fiction provides a great opportunity to create a metaphor for the world in which we live. Pandora, the world depicted in Avatar, is as complicated and contradictory a place as Earth. And our hope in depicting it was that audiences would leave the movie with an appreciation for the lives of the people that they might not ordinarily give much thought to. That they would leave with a greater appreciation for the beauty of our own planet and a deeper understanding of the fragility of our world. If you've seen Avatar, you might remember that the movie opens and closes with the same image, Jake opening his eyes. To me, it was a challenge for people to open their eyes to understand that their actions have an impact on people around them and the world around them. Did we succeed? History will have to be the judge. But I do know that others have succeeded at the same task, far beyond what I imagine were their initial ambitions. Because it's one thing we know from storytelling business, it's that stories can absolutely change the world. Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin helped bring about the Civil War by exposing huge numbers of Americans to the harsh realities of slavery, letting them see that side and convincing them that enslaving others was a moral sin. The power of good storytelling is not to be taken lightly. As we approach it with a sense of responsibility, stories can also move the world in the wrong direction just as easily. The films of Leni Riefenstahl helped put Hitler in power. But movies such as Stanley Kramer's Home of the Brave and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner helped create a shift in the social consciousness in regard to race relations. So fiction doesn't merely entertain us, it molds us. It helps make us who we are. Good filmmakers know more deeply that we cast you under our spell, the more potent its influence will be. Stories do what nonfiction simply can't do. Newspapers want to persuade us through argument and evidence. When we read them or watch the news on TV, our shields are up. We are critical and skeptical, and rightfully so. But when we are absorbed into a story, we drop our intellectual guard. A good story melts our hearts, turns our knees to rubber, and makes it easier to shape our thinking. Stories can change us. I remember a friend of mine calling me after he saw Avatar. And he said to me, "John, I've lived in the same house for 20 years. And after I saw Avatar, I walked out to my car and I noticed an oak tree for the very first time." That's what Avatar did to him. It opened his eyes. It opened his eyes to the world around him. My mother and father were film and television producers. They dedicated their lives to helping people open their eyes in their own way. They made a series of television films based on theatrical plays, and I remember them talking about empathy. They were always making the point that a good actor has the ability to literally walk in another person's shoes, to see the world through another's eyes. My parents understood that movies can help nurture compassion and empathy in a way that cuts across time and space, across racial, religious, and political lines. They taught me that the most important thing movies can do is to help us to see and understand each other. In the 1970s, my parents teamed up to make a documentary film about Martin Luther King that traced the career of this great civil rights leader from the 1959 Montgomery bus boycott to his assassination in 1968. I was only a child at the time, but I remember watching my parents work together on the film and witnessing the effect that it had on the people who saw it, and it made a deep and lasting impression on me. It made film seem like this magic language, a way of communicating with people that did something words couldn't do alone. During the course of making the movie, my parents became very close with Coretta King, Martin's wife. So much so that in the early 1970s, 2 of her children vacationed with us in Montauk, New York. Before the King children arrived to join us, my parents had stopped by a local ranch to arrange for us to go horseback riding. Well, 2 days later, when the King children arrived, we went back to that ranch and were excited to go horseback riding. However, seeing that we were with 2 black children, the ranch suddenly had no horses. Well, if you could see the look in my mother's eyes as she watched the disappointment in the King's children's faces and the defiance in my father's voice as he told the ranch manager what he could do with his horses. It was in that moment that I understood why my parents were compelled to make the King documentary, why they felt the need to tell the story of Rod Steiger's character in The Pawnbroker, which explored the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps through the eyes of a widowed New York pawnbroker, why they felt it necessary to release the Vietnam War documentary, A Face of War, a raw but honest depiction of the horrors and the trials of war. I began to understand that making movies was more than about entertainment, that a good movie could be more than just a way to have fun. I saw up close in blood, sweat, and tears to the people who made them. I began to see the need, the pressing need, for films to address what was happening in the world around us. It's an odd thing in this hyper-connected era that we live in, that we can feel so untouched and unmoved by the problems of other people. Our 24/7 access to information can leave us feeling overwhelmed and alone, rather than energized and connected. But good movies have the power to invite us in rather than to push us away, to make the world not known, not quantifiable, but actually felt. It can be very tempting for filmmakers to preach to their audience about global issues like racism, poverty, or the environment. But of course, the problem with preaching is that you only reach those who are already a part of your choir. We need to reach beyond the choir. We need to invite people into the global community. We need to tell stories that reflect a wide variety of lives and experiences, the kind of stories that help people feel a part of the larger we. Good movies open our eyes to universal human emotions and experiences. They inspire ideas, engagement, and action. I'm lucky that I've been working with Jim Cameron for well over 20 years. First and foremost, Jim is an explorer. He explores the world we live in. He has traveled into the Amazon, hiked glaciers, braved rapids, climbed mountains, and a few years ago, he traveled in a self-designed submersible to the very deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench. But Jim also explores when he's making his movies, not only by pushing technological boundaries, but by presenting stories that challenge people to see things a little bit differently. With all the exploring he's done, with the thousands of miles that he has traveled, he knows there's no distance as great as the thickness of the human skull. He knows that the most difficult and important thing that we can do is to try to connect with each other, to see the world from each other's eyes, bridge the chasm between one point of view and the next. As we near production on a series of Avatar sequels, I'm hoping that these films will not only entertain, but will also get people thinking about things in a different way. That the movies will not only move people emotionally, but that their themes will resonate and get people moving, inspiring them to make a difference. I always hope that our movies, our stories, will keep an audience on the edge of their seat. But just as importantly, I hope it gets them out of their seats. I hope the feelings that our movies evoke will spur audiences to do something that matters to them and to the world. But it's not just movies that have the power to do that. Because if I'm, as a producer, if I'm a CEO of a movie, you are the CEOs of your own life. I encourage you to use your lives the way we use our stories, to challenge people to see things differently, to inspire people to do something that makes a difference. Just by the fact that you're here today, I believe that you are already doing that. You are our future. I look forward to that future. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
David, you were talking about Oscar, so I just felt that I needed to bring Oscar. And Kate also told me that you guys were going on a session break, so I'm going to go by the flags, and anybody who wants to come up and say hello to Oscar when you go on session break, I'm going to stick around and say hello to them.
Awesome.
All right?
Okay. But let's just have someone from security to make sure he doesn't get knocked over.
This amazing Oscar-winning producer has traveled especially to see you from New Zealand, all that way, just to come.
Thank you, Jon.
I would travel further.
Oh.